Hello to all our participants and to our attendees UN Live. My name is Rishi Awata. I am the Head of Event Operations, and on behalf of Inspired Business Media, I'd like to welcome you all to this Industry Live virtual roundtable. This session will run for 1 hour, and for our attendees UN Live, if you'd like to ask our panelists any questions, you can submit them via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we can then address these live later in the session. I'm now going to hand over to today's moderator, and I do hope you all enjoy today's discussion.
Thank you and welcome everybody today. As outlined, I'm David McGoldrick. I'm Chief People Officer for Comfort Keepers and I'm moderating today. My own background, I've 20 years of senior HR management experience within retail, manufacturing, transport, airlines and healthcare. And I've worked as head of HR for a number of companies ranging from Carphone Warehouse to head of HR at Ryanair to now Comfort Keepers, which is part of the Sodexo family. In my spare time, I do international conference speaking and my topics around leadership development and the implementation of service-centered cultures and also organizational performance drivers and a new emerging one, which is the emergence of multi-generational workplace. So look, I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy day today in this unusual, unprecedented, unplanned global pandemic era. There's no doubt our lives, our workplaces, our families, our education, our transport, and our normal ways of work have had a huge paradigm shift, and who knows what the new normality will be like. But we're here today to garner some insights, which I believe is a great panel that covers a wide of industry experience and cross-functionality from HR, learning development, and facilities management. And the topic today is how to create a productive working culture for a varying workforce in the current climate. I think when we had this title, we never believed how hot and I suppose how topical this topic was going to be. And it's also hugely divisive, and it's also uncertain and unclear, with every day bringing, I suppose, a different perspective on what the emerging workplace is going to look like. And it's changing all the time. What we plan today will be changed possibly by tomorrow. So first of all, I just want to introduce the panel to you to give you an indication of who people are. On the panel then we have Asif Iqbal, who's VP HR of Gulf Oil, is an international HR practitioner with all-round experience inclusive of board and work councils in location and implementing human capital strategies to drive business growth across industry sectors such as information technology, manufacturing, oil and gas in the UK, Europe, Middle East and Americas for small and mid-sized publicly listed private and family-owned organisations. Asif, welcome. Second, we have Simi Dubb, who initially started off in learning development with HSBC and Royal Bank of Canada, then transferred into head of talent for BT and moved into Royal Bank of Scotland and then Fidelity Management, and is now international group head of talent development for British American Tobacco. Hi, Sim. Next, we have Tim Rose, who's global head of facilities for Elekta, who tells me he fell into facilities management in the early 90s when he became general manager of Surrey University Students' Union. And then he moved on to facilities manager with Sussex Police and then into private sector with Friends Life, then to aviation industry with Collins Aerospace. He recently moved to Elekta, which is one of the world's leading precision radiation machine manufacturers for the treatment of cancer and brain disorders. Then we have Melanie Lepine, who's global head of learning development and talent for domestic and general. She started with Tesco before moving into American Express, where she specialized in learning and development, and then into Dixon's Carphone Warehouse, and most recently moving to domestic and general group of head of learning and development and talent, owning all the development needs across the group alongside succession planning and diversity inclusion. And then last we have Ben Almond, who's SVP, global head of property for Pearson, who's an experienced corporate real estate transformation specialist with a background in finance and project management. He's also a chartered surveyor in corporate real estate. Ben has operationally operated globally in senior real estate positions, advertising C-suite and board levels for 4 different companies since 2004. He's currently the global head of properties at Pearson and the world's learning company. Ben is also a qualified chartered accountant and a very active judo participant. So moving back then to topic, how to create a productive working culture for a varying workforce in the current climate. The panel will now discuss how the multi-generational workforce has to adapt quickly to remote working and challenges faced by business leaders. So the questions, and Asif, if maybe you could start off and lead this, is working remotely can be a challenge for many people. There are many factors such as mental health, technology, facilities at home, and lack of culture to consider. What do you see the challenge your organisation is facing with regards to multi-generation needs, and are you even considered, and if not, how come?
Thank you, David, and thank you for having me in the panel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the listeners. Remote is the future of work. We all know that. A remote-based lifestyle can certainly offer many advantages to both organizations and professionals. But it has its own set of challenges. And the most common challenges of working remotely with respect to the situation that we have in hand at this point in time was to maintaining the multi-generational workforce, team's morale, and the productivity. And also dealing with distractions. How can we protect them from that distractions? Isolation came as another problem that we have faced in order to keep our resources motivated and maintaining engagement and focus during this period of time. The second challenge that I would highlight for our audience would be keeping your culture front and center. That was a very, very crucial thing for us in order to preach what we, in order to practice what we want to preach always. The third challenge was the team communication challenge, the use of technology to bring people together and use it in a right way and in the right place was the third challenge. Fourth challenge that we had in this situation was protecting us from security risks. How can we ensure that the data that we are sharing with each other in the team meeting is absolutely secured and protected? The internet connectivity, because a lot of people have gone into a long-term working from home for the first time in their lifetime. It was not something which was in their DNA as compared to the new generation, because we are talking about multi-generational community here. So a lot of challenges were there also in order to provide the necessary support. And then the third and the last one was unplugging from work, because it was very natural for the people to actually start working from day and not getting off and going on with that. And what it was for a lot of people was to feel very isolated, very work-oriented, and not giving personal time in order to look after themselves. So to summarize, David, it has been a roller coaster, frankly speaking, in terms of dealing with the challenges. But so far, so good is what my view is. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. So, Simi, is there anything else you'd like to add on to, or is there anything in relation to your own industry that might give a different shine to that?
Well, thank you. I think with Asif, I think it's quite similar in our organization. I imagine in most. But I'd like to offer a slightly different lens to this. We haven't looked at it from a multi-generational perspective at all. We've been, our challenges are experienced by various people depending on their personal circumstances, regardless of sort of age and gender and your multi-generational pieces. We have a range of workforce. We have expats who are working in different countries. We've got people on international mobility. We have working parents. We have people with care responsibilities. And our challenge has been the sheer diversity and range of challenges that people have at different times in different places. And the way in which that we've tried to address that is to keep our culture of outcomes focused as opposed to process of delivery. So, and we've been trying to be able to deal with these on a really regional and local level. So from a corporate perspective, we've done, our business performance is transparent. We continue to communicate with our people around how we're doing as a business, the decisions we're making, and then our cadences, so that we go down to our regions and our local countries and say, actually, look at the nuance that you have for your people, look at their individual circumstances, and let's flex as much as possible. And that to us is what's been the biggest challenge, because there isn't one way to do something for a specific group of people. It has to actually be individual based.
So what I'm hearing then from both of you then is culture seems to be the mesh that's holding what changes need to happen. Tim, what point of view would you bring to us then?
I think Simi's right. I think multi-generational is that you can fall into a trap of looking at that as a key. I think I mean, if we look across my organisation's workforce, we've got 4 generations. We go from baby boomers to Generation Z. And Simi's absolutely right. It's looking at individual circumstances and managing those in the current crisis that we're in, and home working. I sat last year on the interview panels for our potential apprentices. We take 10 apprentices a year. And it absolutely blew me away, because we sat down and they really, really cared about their working environment. They cared about flexible working. They were hugely into the management of stress and mental health, career progression. And above all, they really cared. They'd chosen us because of our core values. That blew me away. That was a real step forward. It wasn't what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting a Generation Z to pick up on those issues. And I think primarily it's about communication. It's about managing the stress load and the working differently over the last sort of 5 to 6 weeks. But primarily, moving forward, that's just going to be the norm. We're going to be having to do that, and we should be doing that as a normal thing. I think if we don't, we're not going to get the best people. We're going to have people walk out, and because everyone will be doing that. We already have, my organisation, it's in the Gatwick Diamonds of the southeast of, and like many, we're really struggling to get the best people. And unless we get it right, we're not going to drive forward as an organisation and get the right people.
No, and it's true, and it's funny. What I heard from you there was the kind of the employee value proposition, again, almost coming to the forefront of the generational, that actually they do want to work with a company that has firm beliefs and values. Melanie, sorry, then in your organisational development, how does that fit in?
Well, so, I mean, when I think about our organisation, it feels very similar to what I've heard already. I think the challenge or area of concern for us is we're predominantly contact centre, which means that we are, I guess, command control. There is a certain regiment and routine to a contact centre environment, and very, very location based. So to go within a matter of weeks from an organisation who have always thought we can't work remotely, the bandwidth won't allow it, the security won't allow it, to actually we have no choice, we really need to make this happen and enable that to happen, has been an absolutely huge achievement for the business, but a huge culture shift for the business too. And I think our biggest challenge, aside of all the technical pieces, which are certainly not my expertise, I think the biggest challenge was, how do you drive consistency of care and consistency of communication with a group of managers and leaders who've never had to work in this environment before? So, we had different levels of skill in a face-to-face environment, and now we've pushed all of those online and pushed them all remote. So I think for us it was, how do we give them the right skills and the right support in order for them to support their people in the right way? And again, linked to Simi and Tim's comments, for us it was about, what does the individual need and how do we help the leaders to help that individual, as opposed to where do they sit in a multi-generational environment. But I think that's, keeping it short, I think that's probably for us the biggest challenge.
No problem. And then, Ben, coming from, I suppose, a slightly different angle, do you think the current global working from home experience and the challenges facing the multi-generational workforce will have a lasting impact on the way we design our office space in the future? And how does this maintain what we spoke earlier on in relation to a positive culture?
Yeah, I'm pick up certainly. I think just from what Simi said firstly around, we've talked about this at Pearson as well. Everyone's lockdown is personal, so we definitely pick that up. I think what you say, it's simple things. Do you live alone, or do you live with family? Do you have dependent relatives? Have you got working home children? Have you got a garden? These things are practical things that are sort of impacting people more really than generational considerations. And I also sort of relate to the contact center situation, because we have similar sort of businesses, particularly across North America, and literally moving physical PCs, because these guys weren't on laptops, into their homes and getting them set up, which I'm sure you did, was a big task. But to give it a sort of corporate real estate perspective, it's I come from a learning company, so as you might expect, we always approach these problems by saying, what have we learned? So Pearson issues now a weekly pulse survey. And we had the first one last week. We had 4,500 responses, and I got one question. And the question I put into it was, what, if anything, are you missing about the office? And literally, it's hot off the press, so I can share it with you. I haven't even shared this internally yet, so I should give you some headlines. Some surprising, not so surprising. Only 6% of people said they didn't have a problem not going back to the office ever again. So 94% of people said they wanted to go back, which is quite interesting for one reason or other. Of those, about 70% of the reasons are what I consider to be related to human contact in various forms. People want the demarcation between work and office and home. People said it's surprising they actually finally decided they did enjoy their commute, because it's what gives them some kind of mental break between the two. Having said for years they hate the commute. So lots of surprising things. We had 20% of responses that were related to problems with IT and or physical equipment. My chair's not good enough, or the technology doesn't work. But we're looking at that in a slightly different lens, because I think work from home in a pandemic is very different from work from home not in a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And many of our employees work at home, for substantial amounts of their time, and they're saying, well, it was much more fun before lockdown happened. So when you guys experience a real work from home, it's far better than this. But one of the really surprising feedbacks for us when I focus the real estate lens is less than 1% of people, 1%, said that they are missing a very focused place to work, which is really dramatic when you think about how we design offices today. So, one of the things to your question, David, around design that we're seriously looking at, and it will be for the future, it's not for today. Right now we've got to get people back to offices, and there's a very different set of considerations. But for the future, do we now, given this experience, expect our offices to be rows and rows of desks where people can work for 8, 9, 10 hours a day? And if people have to do that kind of work, should they be based in an office? And that's a really big challenging question. What we've come up with is probably some different sorts of things that people want. What we're learning really about design of offices is put welfare of your people at the absolute heart of what you do. So I think physical safety and stuff is really important. Focused working environments, yes, you're going to still have some, but maybe collaborative environments are going to be far more important. The use of workplace technology is going to become increasingly important in the way we work. And social and corporate and social responsibility topics, the welfare, social spaces, and how we do it properly. So it's complicated because we've learned sort of like work from home does work for the majority of people, even though there were some concerns around productivity. I think everyone's thinking, maybe actually I'm collaborating some with my colleagues, maybe more now than I did before. Then the next phase is people then say they missed the office, and say 94% of our respondents said that they did miss the office. But then, of course, we have safety concerns, because how do you get to the office? And particularly if you're going on public transport, many of our employees are more concerned about how they get there than what happens when they get there. Now, I run a global organisation, so across some countries, North America, they drive a lot to their offices, so it's less of a problem for them. But in some of our emerging market countries, we're totally dependent on public transport. So this is going to have a different response. So, in summary, I think Asif's point started off with remote is the future of work. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I think the office is here to stay. But I do think that remote working, or should we say, working near home instead of working from home might be, and really it's about choice. So I think the real estate piece is all about that. And the fact that we're going to have more remote and working, not necessarily in office, means trust and culture, and the way we lead our people is going to be absolutely fundamental to the way it all pulls together.
And it's interesting, trust, and we spoke earlier on, to me, trust has different levels across different generations. And I know that amongst the panel, there's a dispute around if the generational issue is or isn't existence. So Asif, then in relation, what are you finding is the biggest common challenge, I suppose, and I call it the multi-generational workforce, because I firmly believe that there is different values and perceptions across different age and ethos. So Asif, what are you finding at the moment is the biggest challenges there?
The top 3 challenges, if I may share with the group, is, of course, maintaining the multi-generational workforce team morale and their productivity. And the kind of organization that I operate in, we have 4 generations working, and it has its own challenges from a work perspective. So that was quite an important piece for us. How can we ensure that each of us do have a high morale and keep giving our 100% as we were doing under the normal circumstances. Some of them needed a lot of attentions because they felt quite isolated. So we deal with those workforce where isolation is also a very critical factor in their life, and that is where we have provided a lot of attention from a family perspective by saying we are there to look after you with the help of a regular communication, reaching out, touch base, and those kind of things. The second important challenge that we had within our organization was keeping your culture front and center. And this is, I think, I have not seen in my 20 years of working experience the importance of projecting the kind of culture that you propagate and demonstrate that by doing it, because we never thought we have to do that at this level. So every act of the leader needs to be in a very positive side of it. We have to exactly practice what we are preaching with the help of our brochures and other things, and during our inductions. This is the time which was unprecedented to actually look after that. And third is, how can we keep on going back to the employees and our staff in terms of keeping the communication channel on? The beauty of this time is, and I always see the positive of this time, and the beauty of this time is, for the first time, the families of the spouses who are working with us have seen the kind of culture that their husbands and the wife and the spouses and the partners do operate. Because when they attend throughout 8 hours of the work sitting at home in front of the laptop or computer, their families have never thought the kind of work that their husband, their spouses are doing. So families getting involved into it. So when we do our global town hall, you will not believe the families do attend, along with their spouses and their partners, and they see what the leaders are saying in terms of how the organization is doing globally, how are we going to get into it. So this is a very interesting time, but it was very challenging in a way, in order to bring the whole mindset to a growth agenda in spite of a very dull and very scary phase all over the world.
No, agreed. And again, it's the culture, and it's the emergence of the family into the culture, which the pandemic has actually brought the workplace home in a positive and negative side.
Absolutely.
I think my own wife has a little bit more of understanding of what I do, that I'm actually literally on the phone all day long, compared to the image previously of whatever that image was. Tim, how would you like to contribute to that, and what's your biggest challenge?
Yeah, Ben was absolutely right. You know, it's very, very different when you're looking at a global picture. I think the biggest challenge for me is that one size hasn't fitted all. My UK site in Crawley, 98% drive in.
Yeah.
So if I take a Singapore office or a Stockholm office, 80% use public transport. So it's been looking at how we manage to communicate and drive those needs on a more local level, and not trying to fit everything into one box. I just had to be more granular approach when we're looking at benefits and what we're doing, and some of the changes that we put in place just to make everything work. Flexible working has always been top of our priority, and is an individual thing between an employee and a manager. There isn't a set policy across the organisation other than the basics across our different silos of work.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think a lot of organisations have been fast-tracked into, I suppose, remote and flexible working, and the policies are only really trying to catch up with that. I think what a lot of organisations have been, I suppose, taken aback by is how easily employees have fitted into this new model.
What I would say is that I think there was a real big reluctance and a fantastic response from certainly from our employees, I'm sure across everyone's. You know, this is happening, we're going to help out, we're going to deal with it, and we're going to get on with it. 5-6 weeks down the line, you know, in one-to-ones with some of my managers, they're coming back to say, I've got an employee in this team that's working off an ironing board or working off the breakfast bar in the kitchen, and they're really uncomfortable. And actually, should we be doing, yes, we should be doing something about that. We should be looking at those, going back to the earlier conversation, looking at those individual circumstances and helping one-to-one with those employees come over them, and whether we can prioritise them getting back into the office over someone who's got an office.
Simi, how would you add then to the conversation around this?
Sure. I mean, in addition to what Asif and Tim has said, I think for us one of the biggest challenges is this, and I think we touched on it earlier, the blurring of the boundaries between work and home life. I think that's been quite a challenge. It's people are tending to work a lot longer. We are a global company, so it was already different hours to have meetings, and then people were flexible. It was part of the ethos, but it's becoming even more now. And we constantly were hearing people saying that I'm actually working much longer, but at the same time they're able to fit in, making lunch for the kids, or going for a walk, or going for a bike ride, or doing the laundry, whatever their circumstances are. So that's been a really big challenge for us. But what I'd like to also add into that is the challenge was, how do we then continue to provide people with the right access and the right tools anytime and in real time? We went shifting from being quite a structured organization, agile in lots of ways around our product innovation, but the way in which the ways of working was quite structured. All of the learning and development, for example, was a lot of it was, structured learning, face-to-face, building relationships, etc. And now it's like, with these blurred lines with everything, how do you provide access to people when it's easy for them to work around their personal experiences? So we actually our communication is there, and then it's cascaded around regionally. We haven't done this big, corporate thing, as I mentioned earlier. When it comes to learning and development, for example, we have started to make everything virtual, but we actually don't do virtual classrooms anymore. Everything has become modularized, so people can pick it at the time of their convenience and in different ways of digital learning channels. So everything from video to it's converted to reading. It's also converted to online virtual chats, web chats, etc. So it's modular and different channels. So we're trying to make everything accessible in as much as possible to everybody, so that they can live with these blurred lines.
Super, thank you very much for that. Melanie.
So I think I agree with everything that I've heard. Really, it feels very similar, particularly the learning approach. We were very traditional in our approach. We're very classroom based, and have shifted to lots more virtual, lots more social. How can we do something a bit more accessible and a bit more immediate, and a bit more flexible? So actually we can react to people's needs and wants, rather than just having a program of activity. We're trying to respond to what people are telling us they want in the moment. But I think there's probably a couple of other things that are coming up for me. So we've talked a lot about people working in different environments, but I think something that I've heard a lot about and seen is actually people responding differently to the whole pandemic, as opposed to just their working environment. So people who have been incredibly robust, incredibly resilient in their working lives, some feel as if they're out of control and are responding differently than you would expect them to behave in their normal day-to-day life. And so there's that assumption that I know how to manage my team and I know what they need from me, and all of that has changed overnight, or a lot of that has changed overnight. And so I think a common challenge that we've had is the people that were strong and resilient before may not be those same strong, resilient people in the middle of a pandemic. And we might need to not just make assumptions about what people need from us, but really, invest time in understanding how people are feeling. So I think that's definitely one for us. And then I think we've spoken a lot about the challenges for the people that are remaining in work. But one of the other challenges that we've faced is the balance between how do you maintain the right working environment for the people who are working, but maintain focus on those people who are furloughed from the business, and how do we keep them involved? How do we keep them connected? How do we keep them engaged? How do we find the right balance of, we're supporting you and here for you, but you're not working, so we're not expecting you to do X, Y, Z. There's been a real challenge for us around how we pitch the right tone around connecting with our furloughed people, and which are the activities that we can do across the board for our employed and furloughed employees versus which are the ones that we're doing specifically for each group. And so I think those are probably a couple of other areas that we've been focusing on to try and make sure that we engage everyone and keep the culture right across all of those different sectors.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see when they start doing studies in the future around resilience, which again sometimes is classed as an intergenerational difference, to see where our resilience scores do come out, because this really is the first global shock that I think the workforce has had probably since the Second World War to a certain degree. And I know in some countries, in relation that there was other wars, but as a global paradigm, it is that. But then, Ben, being a little bit controversial, where is this an lasting impact of the amount of office space that corporate offices need? You have the likes of Twitter now saying, their employees can work from at home for the foreseeable future. Google are telling people work from home, LinkedIn, etc. So a lot of the big office space people are now adapting the working from home model. So how would that impact the corporate sector?
I think it was Google. I saw the article recently said they can work at home permanently.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got our own challenge. I mean, briefly first, I think to just capture some of the things that other people have said in terms of and one of our challenges when everyone's working remotely, and we're quite a remote organisation anyway, so we're very well sort of tech enabled from that perspective. We work very globally online, and a lot of the thing is really about staying connected. So for us, it's really re-emphasising the purpose and mission. For us as a learning company, our mission is to help people in their daily lives to improve their lives through education. That's what connects the whole firm. So, we've been having an executive level every single week. We have an hour's connection across the whole of the executive on a Zoom call. And within my team and many teams across the company, having daily calls. I have a half-hour open session every day, and anyone can turn up to it. And I have between sort of 4 one day to 25 people, and we sit and chat. And like some of the comments here with people's kids and dogs turning up, and we've had a sort of very open and quizzes, which I've not done particularly well in. So, it's quite fun from that perspective. It's important to keep that kind of sort of connectivity. So that's what we've tried to do. But David, looking to your point around the sort of challenges from a real estate point of view, I think. And I think put some perspectives to some of the things that we're doing. One of the concerns I have, it's a little bit like, for those that know it, Amara's law, which is used in the technology space, which says we tend to have a linear view of life, and technology has an exponential change. And so what you tend to do with technology in the short term is drastically overestimate what it's going to do for you, but you significantly underestimate what it will do for you in the future. And I think we need to approach this in the same way. So there's a lot of things flying around about 6-foot offices and putting plastic glass walls around desks and lots of things. And, I think we just need a little moment of caution. And, we're all hoping there's medical solution within sort of 12 to 18 months on this. So, I think we just need to put things in a little bit of perspective in terms of timing. So some of the things I'm talking about are not things to do immediately, but they're things to consider. But I think I like to think in terms of extremes, and we don't tend to go to extremes, but they do sort of stress test your opinions as to where we should go. If you think about space, the big questions are going to be, where do we need that space, and how much do we really need? So we've talked about design already, but I'm looking at that. And I'll throw out some ideas. We've traditionally had location because that's where we wanted to attract our talent. So we've built hub offices in major cities or major parts of the world because that's where we attract people. Think conceptually for a moment. If we have a fully enabled digital world where people can actually really log on and work remotely from wherever. And my son works for the government, so we're having an intellectual conversation around whether the government should now invest more money in enabling internet technology and stuff in remote areas than they should in rail and road. I mean, it's an interesting conversation where we should invest. But if you push that to an extreme, the demographics change, and the rural-urban demographic completely changes in many countries. So the whole concept of talent and location for talent completely changes. So, that's, is that something we think is going to happen? If so, when will it happen, and how does it impact us? So on real estate, it's things like, the investment banks have their employees working in major hubs and cities, but their branches distributed around the country. There's already talk to say, well, actually, maybe we can open some of those retail networks and branches for people to use as local offices.
Yeah.
So you're now merging the mixed use of real estate asset, where the town and country planning is saying, office is one, and education's another, and retail's another. Maybe we can start merging some of this mixed use. Maybe high streets that have basically got underused real estate, maybe we can use those as near offices. There's all sorts of different ways of thinking about, where we can put real estate and how it works. And in terms of, how much you need, that's going to be a factor then of how that balance between remote working need. Service office providers are telling us we're going to have like 50% working from home. So an article from Instant recently on that topic. I don't know, to Tim's point as well, it depends on different countries, but it's something all organisations need to think about, where you need your space, how much you need, and how you need to configure it to attract talent. And there's some big questions out there, which, we're not going to answer in the short term, but we need to sort of stay connected.
I suppose that raises a point then, and go back to Asif in relation to culture has come up here. How then, if culture is sometimes overlooked on a normal thing, how do organizations then ensure that culture is maintained during working from home? And, you know, has there been a shift within organizations to recognize that we need to, I suppose, grow and develop culture now with I suppose, a more flexible workforce working from home?
So, David, I would keep my suggestions with respect to the situation in hand, and my response is with respect to how we are dealing on a day-to-day basis. At this point in time, culture is predominantly around only one component: communication, communication, communication. So, you know, anything which relates to anxiety, morale, productivity, culture front and center is revolving around that as the theme. So strategies that we have adopted to keep culture levels high and to support the staff have been, you know, be visible and vocal, be transparent, because that's something which are quite assuring at this point in time to our global workforce, multi-generational workforce. Be confident in terms of your plan that you have within the organization in order to get out of it. And once, because we are also a global organization, and in some parts of the world, the businesses are opening up. So how the things are getting better there, what is the kind of learning that is coming from there, which we can put that into our plan where the country is shut at this point in time. So be confident with how to get out of that from a business perspective. Be flexible, set the expectations and the rewards in accordance with the reality of these systems, and then the morale would matter. So it is the time for us to give some control to the people in terms of how the things should progress from a workplace perspective. So leaders and managers must be seen and heard. You know, silence is not golden at this point in time. Even small updates would matter a lot to the people, particularly during a crisis. People will have to be told how the organization that they are working for would be doing and is doing at this point in time. We are investing a lot of time from a leadership perspective in order to ensure that the leaders are visible all the time. They are vocal. They are transparent. They are informing people about you know, all the main constituencies, whether they are employees or customers or investors. They are looking for an answer. So do we have an answer in terms of our supply chain, in terms of our looking after the people, in terms of our continuity of the business? So it is critical for leaders to take a consistent, calm tone and measured actions, you know, when it comes to a long range plans. And that is what we are doing. We are recalibrating our objectives accordingly. And then we are also projecting a very confident picture of the organization to our people, so that people who are looking at us from a leadership perspective and being a part of this in this pandemic, and their families sitting at home, when they are looking at us, are finding the whole organization from a culture perspective as in the right hands in order to progress in life. This is where we are coming.
No, that's very, very strong, and I suppose it is around communication. Melanie, then I suppose what can you add on to that? I mean, before the pandemic, we any amount of thousands of communication apps to our employees. So is that going to change, or what's the difference now?
So I certainly think it's changed for us. So I think I agree with everything that Asif said. Certainly our CEO and our exec are front and center and are visible and are sharing lots of strong messages. I think what we've had to do is be really clear about what our communication channels are and let people know exactly where to go for that information. So you're right, there were probably a million WhatsApp groups with lots of people talking in their own different ways, in their own different groups. We've now said, okay, Teams is the tool that we use to meet, to instant chat, and we're using our social media tool. This is the tool. Go to Yammer. It might not be our first choice of social tool, but it's the one we've got. So go here. Here's where we're going to share some of our more informal stuff, and you can expect a week. So the CEO is doing a weekly communication to all of the managers across the business, so that they're getting a consistent message. They know exactly what time, exactly what day every single week. We're getting newsletters out every couple of weeks, so people know exactly where that's going. So I think, yes, we've ramped up, but we've also been very clear about what channels we're going to use for which elements. And we have seen, so aside of the kind of the formal and the very professional side, what's been really nice is we've seen the exec team really helping people to see that the new normal or the current normal is normal. So we've seen them, you know, one of them shared a who can grow the longest beard in lockdown kind of competition, so that people are seeing that there is some fun, there's some light-hearted side to them, as well as the formal, we're running the business and we're going to make it work. Yeah. We've had pictures of them with their pets so that people understand. We've had pictures of their children so that they know that the life that everyone else is experiencing, they get it, they're living it too. And I think that's how they're helping to communicate and drive that culture in helping people see that they're just normal and everybody's the same.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's something, the digitalization of the workplace was something that was a huge topic about 2 years ago. And I think this pandemic has just thrust all organizations into a much more hyper-speed digitalization out of necessity. So Tim, in relation to your side of things, and how are you doing this in relation to, I suppose, maintain the culture and protect it and growing it?
Yeah, I think the same as everyone. You know, our CEO, the first thing he said to his leadership team on the first day we walked out of the office was, whatever we do, we've got to keep our culture and values at the top of everything we do. And Melanie hit it on the head. It's communication. Asif said the same thing. Looking at ways of how we do that, team meetings, one-to-ones with individuals. Two things I just wanted to pick up. Asif mentioned something that I think is absolutely vital, and that's transparency. You know, it's all very well communicating on a regular basis, but be honest, be transparent in everything that we do. Staff will very pick up if you're on anything that you're just bluffing over or you're just papping out. You know, be transparent about the reality of what's going on, the reality of how it's affecting the organisation. And I think you'll then absolutely nail on the trust of your colleagues and staff across the organisation in doing so. The other thing that we have done is been really visual on good news stories, and you know, we're a medical company, and we haven't stopped our manufacturing. We're manufacturing cancer treatment equipment that is absolutely vital in treating cancer across the globe. So, and we've had some huge barriers that we've managed to get across. Moving kit across borders that have been closed, particularly in Italy at the height of the problems they had. And we take the opportunity to get some of those really good stories across the organisation, even if it's a member of a team that's been delivering parcels to doorsteps, grab those and communicate out, because that will help to grow your culture, organisation's culture, and what your staff are doing outside of the norm.
Yeah. No, I actually do agree with your transparency, and I think organizations have become much more transparent, and I think the crisis has, the word I had was almost made organizations mature to a different level, because they've reacted in a space that they hadn't planned for, and there's probably more transparent communication because people just want to keep people safe. So I think there's a human kind of kindred spirit, I think, even within organizations. And going back then to the organization's show, and I suppose the humanity of senior leadership. Simi, sorry, have you what's your thoughts then on how we keep culture in these unchanging times?
It's interesting. I mean, in addition to what everybody said, I mean, we have clear communication. Well, we try to get clear communication, leadership from the top. It's transparent, company performance, who's doing well. There's webinars, panels, you name it. It's everybody's trying, to do this in the right way. We're anchoring it to our ethos, which is our values, principles. Whatever you might want to call them, and it's bold, empowered, responsible, diverse, so things that sort of touch to the core of what we are. So we're trying to make it meaningful. But actually, I'd like to just add a point. It's something that struck me for a point Ben had made quite early on. I think the companies that are going to come out of this a little bit better are the ones that it's about what we do for our people, actually do for our people, and what we do for our community. And I think for us, what's been quite significant is sort of the actions speak louder than the communications. So what we are making sure is that if people don't have access to digital tools, we'll reimburse you, and it's not part of company policy. We're flexible, people have been, we've set up, for example, reading time 3 times a day or in our European region, so that parents who are working from home can sit with their children and they get read to, and it's actually done really well. But it's those actions that make the culture come alive, and it's actually taking the communication to the next level. So that, I think, is something that we've heard feedback on that really makes a difference.
That's a lovely gesture, actually, and one that will be remembered when we get back to whatever the normality is. So Ben, then what challenges do you see for the corporate facing the magnitude of the change and I suppose the total disruption to the way we're working?
Again, I'd just like to sort of reiterate from our perspective, all without repeating what everyone said, because we're doing the same thing on culture, but to pick up particularly on the, keeping cultures and values at the centre of what you do. And we're an education company. We produce digital educational content. That's our big growing business. So, we sat down as an organisation to that effect and looked at all these things that are happening right now and said, given the values of our company, we need to make sure we always do the right thing. And the reason you do the right things for your customers and employees, other than it's ethically correct, is that's what keeps them with you long term. So we've provided a lot of free digital education. So in some of our products, and John Fallon, our CEO, gave a social media talk, to the media on this recently. So I know I can share the numbers with you because he shared them publicly. But we've given up nearly £25 million of revenue on digital content for free, and some of our products are at 350 to 400% in terms of take up. And those of you that haven't had their kids logged onto the Carol Vorderman Maths Challenge, do so, because we're offering it for free and it's excellent. So there's some great stuff there. The other big conversation we had internally was around the furlough system. I know, some of you obviously need to take that, and that's fine. We as a company decided that wasn't for us. And so we chose not to take any of the government's funding. We decided to keep all our employees and fund them all ourselves. And we just felt that was the right thing to do for a company of our size and balance sheet, and that wasn't something that we needed to do. We can fund ourselves pretty well. So, there's some pretty important things. I think people need to face those challenges now and, as they do the right thing. And that was part of our culture, and that's gone down, as you can imagine, incredibly positively with our employees and our customer base as well. So that was one thing. I think to your point around the challenge is more for the real estate industry. I said, we talked about what we design, we talked about space, we talked about where we put it. Big question and big topic that's coming up is how we get this all done. It's phenomenal change, and no single person, no single function, I think, is going to have all the answers to this. And David, you mentioned obviously the digital challenges we've been facing the last few years. So I've been reducing real estate portfolios for many years, on that basis, on the concept when I joined, back into real estate from my investment banking background. Which was because I felt all corporates have got too much real estate in a digital world. Well, all corporates have still got too much real estate in the digital world, but now they've got even more too much real estate because of the impacts that we're seeing from COVID-19. The big question is almost more than what we need to do, which is a big open question, and we need to spend some time to think and talk about it, is how we actually get this done. And to my mind, it's about connecting the ecosystem, both within your companies internally and externally. So you've got to get from the CEO through to every single employee in the organization thinking differently about real estate. So, people tend to approach real estate change in what I call an iterative way. Every real estate project, those of you who've been through a real estate project, everybody thinks, yeah, but I sort of still need my desk and my 2 screens and my chair and my pedestal and my filing cabinets. And I want the coffee to be a little bit better and the tech to be basically better, but it's essentially the same thing as I know today, but just a little bit better. And I often give the story as, Ford will tell you, no one asked for cars, they asked for faster horses, because that's all they understood. And when I was little, we all thought we'd get to Australia in 2 hours with a rocket because no one had invented the internet. And, when you think about it differently, so what we're trying to do in real estate is to stop people talking about assets and stop people thinking about an iterative version of the current way of working, and to think disruptively, to have a complete growth mindset and think, this might actually work in a completely different way. So change management in the real estate space, which starts throughout the whole organization, and putting programs around how you get people to think differently and approach this in a different way. COVID-19 has actually, in a strange way, made that easier for us because everybody has now experienced it. I don't have to convince people that working from home can work and there are different ways of doing it. They've done it. They can feel it. And they know what works and what doesn't work. So that conversation's moved on quickly. And I think, the other way to do this then is connecting that ecosystem. So it's, HR, you guys, real estate, I'm also a finance guy. There are legal issues to this. There are clearly workplace technology issues and many more. So what we need in organizations is people who can connect that ecosystem and bring it all together. So while I like this topic, it's not just a conversation for HR. I don't want to just join topics just about real estate. I think I'm joining ones with workplace technology, with HR, with legal, with finance, to connect that conversation, because it's through that connectivity in the ecosystem that we're going to get, a better answer.
No, it's interesting. I have my own theory in relation to, I suppose, organizational development around technology, that it's almost like Maslow's theory of hierarchy. We've arrived on the beach with our laptops. We've removed ourselves from somewhere, and we need to know where we're going to go. So just two things on housekeeping. We've 9 minutes left. So what I'd like to try and do is maybe do one more question for everybody, and then I might try and do, I suppose, some quick questions and answers. And again, anybody out there who wants to ask a question, please use the box at the bottom. But then going back to Tim, the use of technology, has been accelerated on. How do organizations then, I suppose, support and develop that we haven't got somebody sitting at home in 6 months' time with the ironing board because he's productive, he's quite well? How do we actually manage the digitalization remotely?
Yeah, it's huge. We really had to hit the ground running on that, because what we found, we are an organisation where everyone has a laptop, but of course, everyone sat at their desks in our office here has got 2, sometimes 3 screens across the back, because they're designers. Sending them home with a laptop very quickly, it was obvious that wasn't enough. So, we ended up with our partnership through procurement, setting up an ordering facility through Dell, so that laptops and stands could be sent out. I didn't want to go down the route of distributing screens out of the office, because it's the management are getting them back. So we took a bit of a financial hit. But we've really had to think outside the box. One of the field service engineers that go out to hospitals and troubleshoot the repair of radiation treatment equipment. We issued hospitals with head cameras so that the individuals inside the hospital could sit and listen to and do a live repair from an engineer talking to them in the ear. Really thinking outside the box, that moving forward, we can take that and make it a norm.
Asif, how you manage it? Again, conscious of time, so if I do cut you off with it, please allow me that.
So one is the laptop has always been with the people, but what was not there was a regular way of connecting remotely as it was required. So, very structured team meetings. I don't have to give you the details in the paucity of the time, but regular, very, very immediate one-to-one conversations, depending upon how the situation is. From a leadership perspective, a very regular town halls with the wide group of the people, because that involves their families to ensure that they have been looked after. From an HR perspective, putting a dedicated 24/7 HR support group, as we call that, a COVID-19 warrior support group within the organization, where, depending upon the situation that you are dealing with, you get in touch with X, Y, Z, the names have been given to the people. So they all have felt quite assured that they are in good hands in case if they are not on their own, in case if they are in distress. And I think at this point in time, when the people are feeling very chaotic, and the news channels, when you switch on, is always talking about what is going bad in this world, there is a very less positive news coming. Extending your hand, practicing the policies and the values that you have propagated so far is quite reassuring for an organization. So I would advise all my colleagues to just go to the basics and get connected with your people. Identify the silent heroes and connect them with the overall culture of the organization. That would go much more longer than you expect.
Simi, how are you handling it, and how, I suppose, going forward, how do you think that'll be a successful project?
Yeah, in addition to thing, I think my thought is, with the exception of our factory workers, and it's an entirely different dynamic in the manufacturing side, but our sales reps, etc. Everybody had laptops, but actually we've looked at other digital channels like the phone, right? So our EdApp application on everybody's mobile phone has all the apps that they needed, communication channels. So everybody's got some sort of digital connection that they can have, and not the traditional laptop. But I just want to add really quickly it's to Asif's point, our way of thinking, it's actually the ways of working within that as opposed to the technology. So having the right cadence and understanding how to communicate when is how we're going to address it.
Thank you for that. Melanie?
So our technology I mentioned earlier was huge for us. None of our agents had laptops. None of them had accessibility from home. So it was a huge, huge task to get, you know, over 1,000 agent tops within the space of 2 weeks. It was a massive task, a big cost to the business. But what's interesting is the way that we've progressed so very quickly once that big task was done, to a stage where the business is now saying, actually, you know, we probably could continue to work virtually as an organization. Do we need all our agents to be in the contact center 100% of the time? Probably not. And the performance levels are maintaining. They're as strong as they were within the contact center. So it has, I think it's really shifted the mindset around technology and our ability to, number one, manage the bandwidth, but number two, have trust in our people and ensure that they, you know, giving them that technology and trusting it at home is a positive thing, and it's working.
I just have a question in, and I'll offer it out to the group, so whoever wants to answer, just be conscious we literally have about 2 minutes left, so if I cut you off. So the question is, have you noticed difference in productivity, and specifically where there has been improvements, and under what circumstances does this happen? So who'd like to answer? Oh, off you go.
So I referenced Ben earlier was talking about a survey. We've done a pulse survey with our team. So we typically haven't had brilliant engagement across our teams. And so we decided to do a pulse survey kind of about 6 weeks, or no, maybe it was about 2 weeks ago. And the results about how our people are feeling today, about their purpose and about their engagement levels and about how they feel about their managers is significantly stronger. I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but it is significantly stronger today than it was before the whole pandemic started, because and their focus, so their level of understanding of their purpose is way, way higher than it was before they started. Because I think we were so broadly focused before, and now we're so focused on, right, this is what we need to achieve to get us through this moment, or to get us through today, or to help you to get to your numbers, that it seems to have had a really positive effect on our people. So sales, maybe they're a bit lower because our call volumes are lower, but we are converting at the same level. Our production is exactly the same. Our AHT is the same as it was before. So really positive for us.
We've had that main experience as well. I think for those that have got the technology and those that don't have the disruption and those that don't need the, you know, it's working well. Collaboration, said, you know, collaborating more with my global team on videos like this, and you know, brutally. But we have to be aware there is a minority. It is a minority, but they don't have the technology. The broadband isn't working so well. They don't have that chair they like, so that there are other issues. And I think that's maybe one of our things around the workspace piece, is that it's part of our thing of improving and changing what we do within the office. We need to think again about how we can improve work from home as well from this experience and get people some of those things.